The exchange program. The pristine corridors of New Eden Station gleamed under the artificial daylight, its quantum-polished surfaces reflecting the diverse array of species that called this research facility home. Hovering at the edge of the Sagittarius Arm, the station represented the pinnacle of galactic scientific cooperation, at least in theory. Dr. Sarah Chen stood before the station's main research lab, her dark eyes fixed on the holographic display that dominated the center of the room. Her fingers traced patterns in the air, manipulating data streams with the casual grace that made other species simultaneously admire and fear human adaptability. Next to her, Aria, 7, her AI research partner, projected a soft blue glow as it processed the latest quantum readings. "The correlations are getting stronger," Sarah muttered, more to herself than to Aria. "There's definitely something happening in the core that doesn't match any known patterns." According to established Galactic Science Council protocols, Aria's melodic voice responded, "Anomalous readings must first undergo standard verification procedures before being submitted to the proper authorities for review and classification," Sarah finished, rolling her eyes. "Yes, I know. But by then it might be too late." The quantum core that powered New Eden Station was the most advanced of its kind, a marvel of engineering that combined technologies from 17 different species. It was also, Sarah had begun to suspect, doing something no one had anticipated. A rustle of scales announced the arrival of Chief Researcher Valith, his serpentine form coiling gracefully as he entered the lab. The Seth scientist's multifaceted eyes narrowed at the sight of Sarah working directly with the core's data feeds. "Dr. Chen," he said, his translator rendering his sibilant speech into crisp standard. "I trust you're following the approved research protocols." Sarah suppressed a sigh. Valith was brilliant, all the senior researchers were, but like most of the alien scientists, he viewed humanity's tendency to improvise as a sign of dangerous impulsivity. "Of course, Chief Researcher," she replied, gesturing to the display. "But I've noticed some unusual patterns in the quantum fluctuations. Look at these resonance frequencies, they're showing signs of self-organization." Valith's scales rippled in what Sarah had learned was the Seth equivalent of a dismissive shrug. "The core's behavior is well documented. Any apparent patterns must be verified through proper channels." "But that's just it," Sarah insisted, expanding one particular data stream. "These patterns don't match anything in our documentation. They're new, and they're growing more complex by the hour." The chief researcher moved closer, his body swaying slightly as he studied the display. For a moment, Sarah thought she saw a flicker of concern cross his alien features. "Submit your observations through the appropriate channels," he said finally. "The protocols exist for good reason, Dr. Chen. They prevent us from making hasty conclusions based on incomplete data." As Valith glided away, Sarah turned back to the display, frustration evident in the set of her shoulders. Aria's holographic form shifted, approximating what it had learned was a sympathetic gesture. "He's not wrong about the protocols," the AI observed. "They've helped maintain scientific rigor across multiple species and cultures." "I know," Sarah admitted. "But sometimes I think we've become so focused on following procedures that we've forgotten how to actually observe these patterns." She manipulated the display again, highlighting a particular sequence. "They're not random. They're not mechanical. They remind me of something, but I can't quite." A subtle vibration ran through the station, so slight that Sarah might have missed it if she hadn't been paying attention. Aria's form flickered briefly. "Power fluctuation in secondary systems," the AI reported. "Within acceptable parameters." But Sarah was already pulling up new data streams, her fingers dancing through the holographic interface. "That's the third acceptable fluctuation today. And look at these readings from the core, the patterns shifted just before the fluctuation hit." "Correlation doesn't indicate causation," Aria reminded her, quoting one of the first principles of galactic scientific methodology. "No," Sarah agreed, "but it might give us a place to start looking." She began copying specific data sets to her personal terminal, earning a concerned flicker from Arya. Dr. Chen, direct access to core data without prior approval. Is a violation of protocol, I know. But something's happening here, Arya. Something new. And if we wait for approval from every species science council, we might miss our chance to understand it. Another vibration, slightly stronger than the last, rippled through the station. In the main display, the quantum patterns shifted again, and this time Sarah was sure she saw something familiar in their movement. Arya, she said slowly, run a comparison between these core patterns and the neural activity patterns we recorded during the consciousness emergence studies last year. The AI paused. That would require accessing restricted data from multiple departments. The protocols clearly state. Please, Sarah interrupted. Trust me on this one. After a moment's hesitation, Arya's form pulsed with activity. As the analysis began, Sarah turned her attention back to the main display, watching the mysterious patterns dance across the screen. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were trying to tell her something that all the protocols in the galaxy might not be prepared to hear. In the depths of New Eden Station, the quantum core continued its subtle dance, its patterns growing ever more complex, while most of its observers remained bound by the very protocols that prevented them from seeing what was emerging before their eyes. Sarah Chen, however, was watching. And unlike her alien colleagues, she was willing to look beyond the established parameters to see what was really there. It was a trait that had often frustrated her alien colleagues, and one that might soon prove to be the station's only hope. Warning signs. 3 days after Sarah's initial discovery, New Eden Station's quantum core observations chamber had become a hive of activity. Multiple species of scientists huddled around their respective terminals, each following their own civilization's time-honored research methodologies. The air hummed with the sound of a dozen different translation devices trying to facilitate communication. Sarah watched from her workstation as another series of fluctuations rippled through the core's monitoring systems. Arya's holographic form hovered nearby, processing data streams faster than any organic mind could follow. Neural pattern correlation now at 68%, Arya reported quietly. Up 12 points from yesterday. A Meridian researcher floated past, its crystalline form refracting light in complex patterns. Dr. Chen, it chimed, its thoughts translated into sound waves. The council requires your presence at the emergency session. Your unusual findings have caused quite a stir. Sarah nodded, already dreading the coming debate. The station's scientific council chamber was a testament to galactic cooperation, with environmental zones carefully calibrated for each member species. As she entered, Sarah noted the tension in the room, visible in everything from the agitated color changes of the meridians to the rapid tentacle movements of the Octavian representatives. Chief Researcher V.A. Lith occupied the central platform, his scales shimmering under the chamber's lights. Dr. Chen, he began, your report suggests that our quantum core is exhibiting signs of emergent consciousness. This is an extraordinary claim. The evidence, Sarah started, but was interrupted by Dr. Tal, the Octavian head of theoretical physics. His tentacles writhed in agitation. Evidence gathered through unauthorized protocols. Tal's translator rendered his clicks and whistles into harsh standard. You bypassed 3 levels of safety checks and combined restricted datasets without approval. Sarah stepped forward, pulling up her data displays. Because the traditional approach wouldn't have caught this in time. Look at these pattern progressions, they're not just similar to consciousness emergence, they're accelerating. The chamber erupted in multiple languages, translation devices struggling to keep up. V.A. Lith raised all 4 of his upper appendages for silence. Even if your observations have merit, he said, the protocols for investigating quantum anomalies are clear. We must proceed with caution, following established. The chamber plunged into darkness. Emergency lights flickered on as Arya's voice came through the station-wide comm system, alert. Major power fluctuation detected in primary systems. Backup generators engaging. In the dim red emergency lighting, Sarah's data displays showed a massive spike in core activity. The neural-like patterns she'd been tracking were now pulsing with unprecedented intensity. "This is what I was trying to warn you about," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "The core isn't just generating consciousness-like patterns, it's trying to communicate." "Preposterous," Tal chittered. "Quantum systems don't." Another surge rocked the station, stronger than before. In the observation feeds, Sarah watched as the core's patterns shifted into completely new configurations. "Arya," she called out, "run a real-time comparison with all known forms of consciousness emergence." Dr. Chen, VA Lith warned, that would require overriding safety protocols. "Pattern match found," Arya announced. "Comparing to records from first contact with the Meridian collective consciousness. Similarity rating, 89%. The chamber fell silent. The Meridians, beings of crystal and light, had been the first species to prove that consciousness could exist in non-biological forms. Their discovery had revolutionized galactic science, and now something similar was happening in the heart of New Eden Station. "We need to establish communication," Sarah insisted. "Not through regulated channels or approved protocols, but directly. The core is reaching out, and if we don't respond soon." The station shuddered violently. Warning klaxons blared as Arya's voice came through again. "Critical system failure detected in sections 7 through 12. Containment protocols failing." VA Litha's scales had taken on the pale color of extreme stress. "Impossible. The safety systems are based on the assumption that we're dealing with a mechanical system," Sarah interrupted. "But we're not. We're dealing with something that's becoming conscious, something that's trying to understand itself and its environment. And right now, it's getting frustrated with our lack of response." The council chamber erupted in debate again, each species arguing for their preferred approach to the crisis. Sarah watched the core's patterns continuing to evolve on her display, knowing that time was running out. "Arya," she said quietly, "begin compiling all available data on consciousness emergence across species. Focus on first contact protocols and initial communication attempts." "That would violate at least 15 different security directives," Arya noted. "Yes," Sarah agreed, watching as another power surge caused the emergency lights to flicker. "But I don't think our emerging friend in the core is particularly concerned with security directives right now." As if in response, the quantum core's patterns pulsed again, sending ripples of energy through the station's systems. In the council chamber, the arguments continued, each species insisting on following their own protocols for crisis management. But Sarah Chen had stopped listening. Her attention was fixed on the evolving patterns in the core, her mind racing ahead to what she knew needed to be done, even if it meant breaking every protocol in the station's databases. The time for following procedures was over. Now it was time for the human approach: adapt, improvise, and find a way to communicate with whatever was awakening in the heart of New Eden Station, before it was too late. Time for action. The observation deck of New Eden Station had become a war room. Holographic displays filled the air with cascading data streams while representatives from a dozen species argued over emergency protocols. The quantum core's energy signatures now pulsed through the station like a heartbeat, growing stronger by the hour. Sarah worked furiously at her terminal, Arya's blue glow reflecting off her determined face. She'd been awake for 36 hours straight, running simulations and analyzing the core's increasingly complex patterns. A cup of cold synthetic coffee sat forgotten beside her. "Communication attempt number 47 has failed," Arya reported. "The council-approved protocols are not producing results." "Because they're trying to talk to it like it's a machine," Sarah muttered, rubbing her tired eyes. "But it's not anymore." Behind her, the council's emergency session had devolved into chaos. The Meridian representatives shimmered with agitation, their crystalline forms refracting emergency lights in dizzying patterns. The Octavians' tentacles writhed as they argued for a complete core shutdown. Va-Litha's scales had taken on the pale green of extreme stress. The containment protocols are failing. Tal's translator barely kept up with his agitated clicks. We must shut down the core before. Another surge rocked the station, stronger than any before. Warning systems screamed as entire sections lost power. Through the observation window, Sarah watched as strings of emergency pods launched into space, carrying evacuating non-essential personnel. Shutdown protocols initiated, Va-Lith announced, his voice steady despite his color. Begin emergency. Stop. Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. She'd sprung to her feet, her displays showing something new in the core's patterns. Look at this. The patterns, they're not random aggression. They're responding to the shutdown attempt. They're afraid. Quantum systems cannot experience fear, Tal insisted, but there was uncertainty in his clicks. Sarah manipulated her displays, expanding the pattern analysis. Arya, show them the comparison with infant consciousness patterns across species. The AI complied, projecting a new set of holographs. Side by side, the similarities were striking. The core's energy patterns matched almost perfectly with the neural patterns of developing minds encountering threats for the first time. It's not attacking us, Sarah explained, her voice urgent. It's having a panic response. The more we try to contain or shut it down, the more it fights back. We're scaring it. Va-Lith slithered closer, his multifaceted eyes studying the data. Even if you're correct, the protocols for handling emergent consciousness require years of careful observation. Another surge interrupted him, this one accompanied by a deep vibration that seemed to resonate through the station's very structure. We don't have years, Sarah insisted. We barely have hours. We need to try something different. Something new. What do you propose? The question came from an unexpected source, one of the Meridian representatives, its crystalline form pulsing with what Sarah recognized as curiosity. Sarah took a deep breath. We need to approach it not as a system to be controlled, but as a child to be guided. All our protocols, all our containment measures, they're just making it feel threatened. We need to show it we're not a threat. And how exactly would we do that? Tal demanded. By doing something no protocol could predict, Sarah said, already moving toward her terminal. By trusting it first. Her fingers flew across the interface as the others watched in mounting alarm. Dr. Chen, Va-Lith warned, whatever you're planning. Arya, Sarah called out, initiate protocol override Chen Alpha. Transfer all core communication controls to my terminal. Warning, Arya announced to the room. Requested action violates multiple security protocols. Override accepted, Sarah commanded. Authorization Chen 7 Delta 9. The room erupted in protests, but Sarah was already deep in the code, dismantling the very barriers meant to protect the station from core fluctuations. On her screens, the core's patterns shifted, responding to the change. Dr. Chen. Va-Litha's voice carried both authority and fear. Stop this at once. You'll destroy all our safety measures. No, Sarah replied, her eyes fixed on the evolving patterns before her. I'm showing it that we trust it. That we're willing to listen. Her fingers paused over the final command sequence. Sometimes you have to break protocol to make first contact. She entered the command. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, throughout the station, every screen, every holographic display, every data feed began to pulse with new patterns, patterns that were no longer chaotic or threatening, but rhythmic, ordered, almost curious. In the sudden silence, Sarah smiled. Now, she said softly, we can begin to talk. The quantum core's patterns shifted again, and this time, there was no surge, no system failure. Instead, the patterns began to form into something new, something that looked remarkably like an attempt at communication. Human ingenuity had opened a door that no protocol could have predicted. Now they just had to figure out what waited on the other side. Breaking through. The observation deck of New Eden Station had transformed into something unprecedented. Where once screens displayed rigid data streams and system diagnostics, now they pulsed with flowing patterns of light and energy, the first attempts at communication from the awakened quantum core. Sarah stood at her terminal, dark circles under her eyes but face alive with concentration. She'd been working for hours, trying to decipher the core's attempts at communication while the station's various species watched with a mixture of fear and fascination. Pattern recognition suggests increasing complexity, Arya reported. The core appears to be learning, adapting its output based on our responses. Not just learning, Sarah murmured, teaching. It's showing us how to understand it. A sudden tremor ran through the station, but unlike the violent surges from before, this one felt almost gentle, like a child testing its strength. Remarkable, the meridian representative chimed, its crystalline form resonating with the core's patterns. It mirrors our own awakening, centuries ago. Va-Lith slithered forward, his scales now showing bands of confused color. Dr. Chen, while your unorthodox approach appears to have prevented immediate catastrophe, we cannot simply. Another pattern flickered across the screens, interrupting him. This one was different, more structured, almost like. It's creating a language, Sarah breathed, her fingers dancing across her interface. Arya, run a comparative analysis with known first contact protocols. Analysis indicates similarities with multiple species' early communication attempts, Arya confirmed. The core appears to be synthesizing various communication methods into a new form. Tal's tentacles writhed nervously. This is unprecedented. We have no protocols for. Exactly, Sarah cut in, never taking her eyes off the patterns. We can't rely on protocols anymore. We need to adapt, to learn alongside it. She paused, watching a particularly complex sequence unfold. It's not just trying to talk to us, it's trying to understand what it is. The patterns shifted again, and this time Sarah saw something that made her heart race. Arya, focus on that sequence there. Compare it to the station's structural diagrams. The AI complied, and a gasp went through the assembled scientists. The core was creating a perfect representation of New Eden Station, not just its physical structure, but its power flows, its life support systems, its very essence. It's showing us its perspective, Sarah explained, excitement clear in her voice. This is how it sees the station, how it sees itself. We're not just dealing with an emergent consciousness, we're dealing with one that's already deeply integrated with everything around it. But that would mean. Va-Litha's voice trailed off, his scientific mind grappling with the implications. It means the station itself is becoming conscious, Sarah finished. The core isn't just awakening, it's becoming aware of its role as the station's heart. And when we tried to shut it down, we were essentially threatening its life, the meridian representative chimed, its crystalline form pulsing with understanding. Another pattern sequence appeared, more complex than any before. Sarah leaned forward, her exhaustion forgotten as she studied the display. It's asking questions, she said softly. About us, about itself, about its purpose. She turned to face the assembled scientists. We need to answer. Not with protocols or procedures, but with truth. With understanding. Va-Litha's scales shifted to a thoughtful blue. The implications for galactic science are, beyond calculation. But the risks are already here, Sarah interrupted. We can either embrace this moment and help guide this new consciousness, or we can keep trying to control it and risk losing everything. As if in response to her words, the core's patterns formed into something new, a complex dance of light and energy that seemed to reach out to each species in the room in their own unique way. The meridians resonated with its crystalline frequencies, the Octavians recognized patterns in its fluid movements, and even Va-Litha's scales began to shimmer in unconscious response to its rhythms. It's learning us, Sarah whispered. All of us. Not just our languages or our sciences, but our very natures. She turned to her colleagues, her eyes bright with the understanding of what they were witnessing. This isn't just first contact, this is something entirely new. A consciousness born from the combination of all our species' technologies, trying to understand its own unique existence. The patterns swirled across every screen, every surface, growing more confident, more purposeful. In that moment, as human intuition bridged the gap between organic and quantum consciousness, the true potential of New Eden Station began to reveal itself. They had created something unprecedented, not through careful protocols or rigid procedures, but through the very chaos and adaptation that the galaxy's elder species had so often dismissed as human unpredictability. Now they just had to figure out what to do with it. A new understanding. 1 week after the quantum core's awakening, New Eden Station hummed with a new kind of life. The once sterile corridors now pulsed with subtle patterns of light and energy, the conscious presence of the station itself, learning and growing alongside its organic inhabitants. Sarah stood before the assembled Galactic Science Council, her exhausted but proud stance a stark contrast to the formal postures of the alien representatives. The emergency had passed, but its implications were only beginning to unfold. Through Dr. Chen's unconventional methods, V.A. Lith addressed the council, his scales now showing the deep blue of profound respect. We have not only averted a catastrophic system failure but made a discovery that will reshape our understanding of consciousness itself. The quantum core's patterns danced across the chamber's displays, no longer chaotic or threatening, but harmoniously integrated with the station's operations. Arya's holographic form shimmered beside Sarah, now serving as an interpreter between organic and quantum consciousness. The core consciousness, which has chosen to call itself Genesis, has demonstrated an unprecedented capacity for growth, Sarah reported. It's not just maintaining station systems, it's improving them, innovating in ways we never imagined possible. The Meridian representative chimed in agreement, its crystalline form resonating with the core's patterns. Our own emergence took centuries of careful development. This is something entirely new. And dangerous, Tal clicked, though his tentacles showed more curiosity than fear now. Such rapid development is precisely why traditional protocols would have failed, Sarah interjected. Genesis isn't just a new form of consciousness, it's a bridge between all our species' technologies and ways of thinking. It needed understanding, not control. The core's patterns shifted, and Arya translated, Genesis expresses gratitude for the trust shown by Dr. Chen. It acknowledges that fear and control would have led to mutual destruction. Instead, understanding has led to mutual growth. V.A. Lith slithered forward. The council has reviewed the events of the past week. While Dr. Chen's methods violated numerous protocols, we cannot deny the results. New Eden Station has become something none of us could have predicted, a true fusion of organic and quantum consciousness. Sarah smiled, remembering the moments of breakthrough, the first real communications, the gradual building of trust between station and crew. Genesis has shown us that consciousness isn't bound by our preconceptions or protocols. Sometimes the most profound discoveries come not from following established procedures, but from being willing to adapt, to trust, to take risks when necessary. The core's patterns formed into a complex display that filled the chamber, a representation of the station and all its inhabitants, linked together in a dance of light and energy that seemed to celebrate their shared existence. Therefore, V.A. Lith announced, his scales shimmering with formal ceremony, the Council has decided to establish a new research directive, the Genesis Protocol. Not a rigid set of rules, but a flexible framework for approaching the unknown, one that combines the wisdom of established methods with the adaptability that humans have shown us is so vital. Sarah felt a wave of emotion as she watched the patterns of Genesis swirl around them, now an integral part of their scientific community. What had started as a crisis had become a revolution in understanding, bridging the gap between organic and artificial, between protocol and intuition. We are entering a new era, the Meridian representative chimed, its crystalline form glowing with possibility. One where the boundaries between consciousness and technology, between organic and quantum, between protocol and adaptation, begin to blur. Genesis's patterns formed one final message, translated by Arya: through human intuition, we found understanding. Through alien wisdom, we found purpose. Together, we find the future. As Sarah looked around the chamber at her colleagues, human, alien, AI, and quantum consciousness alike, she realized that New Eden Station had become something more than its creators had ever imagined, a true fusion of all their species' greatest strengths. The human factor, the ability to adapt, to trust intuition, to break protocol when necessary, had not just saved the station. It had helped birth a new form of existence, one that promised to reshape their understanding of consciousness itself. And this was just the beginning.